2 weeks ago, Greg was at BHP and he was talking about some of the future roadmaps for Strato. And one of the areas that Greg was talking about was Strato reporting. And in the meeting, my understanding is that Greg also had somebody who's a SAP Analytics Cloud expert at the time. And they were really questioning Greg, so why would I go Strato, or why are you building Strato reporting when realistically SAP's full direction is SAP Analytics Cloud? And I don't think you could really answer that. And I think it's really, and in the meantime, I've kind of been using SAP Analytics Cloud a bit, and I've been talking to Stephen Gallo about this a bit, and we've probably got some thoughts on what the differences are, and I think it's really important probably for the team to kind of understand what our intentions are here, because we don't want to build the SAP Analytics Cloud, because why would somebody go to this versus this? So we need to understand what the issues are here versus what we want to do here. So I thought I'd just share with you some of my thoughts on that. So the first thing is that the way that SAP Analytics Cloud works is essentially you build a model of which is like a data model, and essentially that might say I want to connect through to here, or I want to connect through to here, and it's going to bring the data in, and it's really like importing an Excel spreadsheet in the day. You bring it in, and you can bring in, maybe say I want to bring in this group of employees or this company code and so on, and then you expose that into a story, and that gets displayed. And it could be in a dashboard, and an interactive dashboard and so on. But at this point in time, here, as far as we can see, the story is, and the dashboard is essentially static data. So if at this point in time something changed down here or here, it doesn't necessarily pull the data. This model can be set up to dynamically bring in the data on a schedule. So it might be a schedule basis, but it doesn't do it dynamically. So when I'm looking at what we're trying to do, and when we bring the data into here, into this model, we bring in all the data. So let's say that we're BHP, we bring in the whole BHP. But if I'm a manager looking at the story, I'm not convinced that I can go in there and actually just see my data, because I don't have access to all the other employees in my company. I'm a manager with 5 reports that sit under me. How do I limit SAP Analytics Cloud to only see that? And I think there's limits. So these limits are actually what's going to make us sell Strato. Okay. So that's kind of the picture at the moment. So then when I think about Strato reporting, and I think we're kind of focused a little bit on Strato reporting as a standalone thing. The way I see it is, so we've got Strato documents, and the Strato reporting allows us to feed the data to Strato documents from here and other sources. So one of the first reasons we want to build Strato reporting is because at the moment when we drag in fields, we can't say I want to aggregate. It's really at a document level. We can't really say I want to aggregate all these fields. I want to get at a company level. I want to get a total cost at a company or a cost center and things like that. So it's not really a reporting tool, Strato, at the moment. But at times we might want to put that data into a document that's more of a reporting, a company-wide document. So the way that we think we'll do that, including things like doing charts and getting trend data into Strato, is through Strato reporting. So the first thing about Strato reporting is it's really to feed data into Strato documents to allow us to create the documents in it. And without that, I think we're going to be limited as to what we can build here. So before we talk about this as a standalone tool, I think it's firstly part of an integrated tool. But at the same time, what we said is, now we also have, in SAP, we have Easy Reporter, and we have web reporting. And ultimately we said, well, we either need to continue to build this web reporting, but at the same time we're kind of starting to build this Strato reporting thing. So we've made a decision that we will close out that and actually move it over to the web front end to Strato reporting. And that's why we've kind of got the UI, which is to display the documents, but that UI can be used by on-premise and by Strato reporting. So technically, that's kind of what we're producing. Now, what is the differences and how will customers use this is more my interest. So some of the things that I think as a payroll user, if they're going to move from running reports inside of SAP to running them in Strato reporting, we need it to be real time or somewhat dynamic. So it needs to pull the data. So the example is, I run a payroll and I want to be able to report on it. And I might rerun that payroll and I want to report on it. Or I might run a payroll simulation and I want to report on it. So I want to be able to go into that somehow. Second thing is selection of data is super important. So think about, for those who've seen the on-premise side or SAP, when you run reports, you are going to put in some dates. Or more importantly, for most of our core customers, you're going to put in a payroll area and period. And that's the way that we select our data inside of SAP. And so if we're going to be replacing this, the Easy Reporter UI, because in the long run I see us using Strato reporting as the UI to execute the reports that sit on SAP. The data manipulation gathering will all come from Easy Reporter and continue to come from there, but how we visualize and how we select the data will need to come from up here. But you look at this and you think, well, that's really simple. But in SAP Analytics Cloud, think of the scenario that I've got a model that you've imported the data as, and I can select the data periods, and then I put it into a story and I visualize it. But think of the scenario where I've got five payroll managers, and they're all running the same report, but they all want to run on different payroll areas, and they want to visualize different data at different times. And you can't do it through this model. You need to have the scenario where the story goes straight to SAP, or the story goes straight to SuccessFactors, and SuccessFactors doesn't, or SAP Analytics Cloud doesn't really allow you to do that. So it's not really dynamically done. So this is really important, and I cannot see SAP building core payroll type selections in SAP Analytics Cloud. The third one is selection options. So we put in things like the site, the company code, the employee status, the payroll area. There's hundreds of them, and we need to be able to select that. We need to be able to say when we run this story that, hey, I don't want to just get the data for this payroll area for this period. I also want to just get this group of employees, and I'm narrowing it down to this smaller group or this smaller group or this smaller group. So you kind of need this dynamic selection. Again, I don't think that's possible in here. Fourth, security. So if I'm the person who runs this model, it uses a certain API user ID to access these systems. That API will bring the data back based on your security. But then let's say I've got full security. But I've got users over here who can only see the weekly payroll and not the monthly, because that's the executive team. So I can be exposed to this data. This works really super well for things like high-level headcount reporting, finance reporting at a rolled-up GL level. But when you get down to what we deal with a lot of that time, it's that core business, payroll and HR, doesn't really work that way. So security needs to be applied. And there's two types of security. There's what you have access to, and there's like managers level. So think of it like I have access in SAP terms. You have a thing called structural authorizations, and it means that you only have access to the people who sit under you in your department. So the security needs to go into SAP, and at the individual person who's running this. So if 20 people run this story, each of them could get different data coming back. And again, I have seen that sort of stuff built into business warehouses and stuff, but it's really dynamic. It's really done on an ad hoc basis and on a customization basis. So then we have the ability to do this up front now in our tool. ESS and MSS. So similar type of thing. The employee, especially at an employee level, if you're a person who wants to see reports, so you want to go and see your leave balances for the last 12 months, you're not going to, I don't believe you're going to log into SAP Analytics Cloud to go and see your leave balances. And if there isn't a tab or a tile that sits in success factors, and keep in mind, you no longer really have access to the SAP side of things. So how are you going to see ESS and MSS? So again, this is what Strato reporting is really designed to do. It's also designed around some of the, it will be designed, or it is designed around some of the more challenging things in reporting. And if I look at something like Easy Reporter and what we developed there, it's no good to just say I have access to the data that sits in the system. So for example, in SAP, your basic pay, your wage types, how you get paid, and so on, all can get reported in a tool called Ad Hoc Query in SAP. But in order to get it into columns and manipulate it into the right way in order to produce the reports, there's a huge amount of manipulation you've got to do. And often you have to get the data and download it. So what we have here is the ability to really build a purpose-built tool. And whilst we want to keep it generic, I also think we can't keep it too generic, because that's the problem we're going to get up here. So sometimes it may be better to choose our market and make it smart enough that we can customize things. So things like wage type selection, many other things. So it might be general ledger accounts from down here. Up here, we might have some interesting headcount reporting we want to pull out of success factors. Could be lots of things. Key thing is we've got to keep a really open mind and think about what the end user wants. So I would say flexibility of the tool. So all of those, to me, I think at the moment we're kind of dealing with the scenario where SAP Analytics Cloud is like a black box. It's out there, and SAP have said, oh, we're going to have this people analytics options, and we're going to deliver some things, but really no one's seen it. No one knows what's coming. But I do think it's going to be fixed. And as soon as you start to apply these things, and probably tied back to what our core business is, because think of it, in 3 years' time, we want most of our Easy Reporter customers especially, but in extension to that, the SuccessFactors customers, the new ones, we want them to be using this as the UI, and this is the back end side. So we slowly want to migrate things. We won't migrate everything, because down here we can create interface files, we can create some really complex stuff, and there's some things in here that are really SAP specific. We may decide we don't want to do that. We may decide we want to build it into there. We don't know yet. But certainly for running reports and building new reports, we want to set it into here and have it linking to these things. And these are some of the reasons why. I'm sure there'll be more, but they're some of the ones that really come to mind initially. So, yep. Any questions on that reason? Are these things that you were aware of, or has anyone looked at? I guess these are things that I kind of think that we all should be thinking about as to why we're doing this. And at the moment we can target building a tool that reports data, but in reality it's not just about getting the data out and making something that we can do up here, because there's lots of analytic tools. We've got to be different, and I think the best way to be different is to be very tightly integrated into these systems as much as we can. That's it from me. That to a certain point in SAP Analytics Cloud, you can bring in multiple models and kind of join them. It's still a bit of a technical tool. And the last one is non-technical. I'll emphasize that because my feeling is in order to build the model, I need to know about APIs. I need to know about OData connections, and I need to be able to put in selection options against those OData connections that say I want to select this date range and I want to select these fields. So to my perspective, I think this is, I actually feel that what most customers will do is the model and the story will be a techo, and this display of the story is the user. Our intention is that this is all user. So, we've got to keep it simple. We've got to keep it easy enough that a person in payroll can do it. No technical knowledge, and change it quickly and dynamically. So, Greg, we need to formulate that into, yeah. So, and people will see, what people see in the demos is they see this. Yep. They don't see this, and they don't see the limitations here. And I don't want to go out and put that in the marketplace and tell SAP, these are all the things that I'm seeing, but these are the things I'm seeing. And it was interesting because I was talking to Stephen Gallo, because we've got, so from SAP, we've created, from Easy Reporter, we've created a connector, which is really an OData connector that will be used to import Easy Reporter data straight into SAP Analytics Cloud. And while Stephen was building this, and I believe that this is a sellable solution to the customers, because when the Techo team here want to expose SAP data, they can now use our connector. But I was talking to Stephen about some of these limitations. He's saying, I don't know how we're going to ever build this stuff, and I don't know how we're going to expose selection options and payroll periods. And I said, that's not your concern, Stephen. In fact, it's a good thing. Look at it in a good way. It's not because he was looking at it a bad way. And I said, no, look at it a good way. From our perspective, this validates why we're doing this thing down here. If this did everything that I mentioned over here, then why would we be building it? Yes. It wouldn't make sense. Except for maybe to feed Strato documents. But because it doesn't do any of this, and there's probably another 20 things that will come up over time. So these are just initial high level things. That help work out what our intentions are?
I use cats.